I'm Ann Wright, and I work at the CMU Create Lab on tools to help people do personal health self-tracking. And when I say tools, I don't just mean technological tools, but also cultural tools, trying to figure out how do we engineer the situation so that people can be able to do this and be able to do this in a better way. I'd like to start out by telling you a little bit about what led me to this. I was actually the lead systems engineer for personal... excuse me, the clicker isn't working. Okay, well, I guess I'll do it without slides. I was lead systems engineer for prototype Mars rovers at NASA Ames Research Center. And that was a great, here we go. That was a great job, and I liked it a lot. But after a while, I actually became too sick to keep doing it. And this was all the sort of vague stuff that screws you up but comes up negative on all the tests. And there's no sort of diagnosis for it that actually gives you any useful information. I mean, saying you have IBS doesn't tell you anything about how to be in pain less. And so after pushing the doctors as much as I could and ending up with these sort of last resort diagnoses, like somatoform disorder, I said, well, I know how to debug one-off systems. I'm a one-off system. So let me see what I can do. And at the time, I hadn't heard anything about self-tracking. This was before quantified self started by a little bit. But I started taking pictures of food and logging weight and logging meals and started paying attention to how I was doing. And that did eventually lead to figuring something out that really surprised me. So a doctor, after I kind of hit the end of the rope, said, well, this is Vata imbalance in Ayurveda. We can't really help you, but why don't you go talk to the Ayurveda people? And through that, I figured out that I seem to have a serious problem with nightshade, which is potatoes, tomatoes, eggplant, peppers. And this is really obscure. No doctor is ever going to tell you this. This is something that a few thousand people know about, and they write really lousy books, and so it's probably not going to ever be in the public conscience. But everyone who's figured it out has figured it out experimentally, as I did. And I started looking at, what's going on here. I mean, my whole model of the universe should say that eating these things should not make any difference. But yet my experience said it did. So I started looking at other examples of people who had results where things affected them differently than they expected, and then they'd been suffering in these sort of mysterious ways, and then they figured out these insights, and then they were able to kind of run their life better with this new information. And I said, well, this has been a transformative experience for a lot of people. How can we spread this experience? And I looked at, for the people who had successfully done this, what they had done. And what I saw was an iterative process where they were observing, capturing, reflecting, and adjusting. So there's sort of this feedback loop where, based on what they saw, they would change what they were doing and then see what effect that had. And so I looked at examples. For instance, Alan, who you met earlier, he was observing what he ate and his activity and capturing his blood glucose readings. And in the process of reflecting on that, he was adjusting what he was eating. And that had a huge effect on stabilizing his blood sugar. So I said, okay, well, what in this process can we improve? What can we do something about? And realized that really the capturing and reflecting was where we could contribute. And so this was about the time when a lot of the passive tracking devices were coming out for being able to passively track things like sleep and activity and weight. And there's also active tracking, which is really important part of this. Things like MyMe, taking pictures of your take pictures of your food, that sort of technique. And then also other contextual data to kind of remind yourself of when these sort of events was happening, what was going on, and be able to inform for these things that are involved in sort of the environment and the context. And so we built a system to be able to take all of this and bring it together and make it explorable. And the first couple of versions we did ourselves, and the most recent we've merged with another open source project called Fluxstream that can bring in a lot more of these things like Twitter feeds and calendar entries and things like that are really helpful in your reflective process. And we put a lot of effort into making it explorable. So we made it so that, just like Google Maps, you can pan and zoom continuously in time and be able to explore things. So if you see a feature that is of interest, you can go in and you can really ask questions about it and look at it in depth and bring together things like photos and other data together. And as we were working with people, is there a question? So as we were working with people, we refined the interface and changed how it worked, made it kind of more script chart-like, and continued to have this sort of explorability. And sorry, this is supposed to. There we go. And so, when you're using this, you want to look at certain things that are of interest to you. So if you're having headaches, maybe you're looking at your recordings of headaches. In my case, it's how my guts are doing, and just very similar to Sean. And so if I look at this, I see that most of the time I'm okay, which is the 4s, which is the main level that you see there. But sometimes things go awry. And so what I would want to do is I would want to go and I would see what was going on around the times it went awry, and does that give me any new ideas? And if we look, for instance, at the Google Latitude data and at the calendar data, when I go and look at this, I see that right before the big problems happened, I just got back from a trip, and I went out to dinner with some folks from out of town. And I look at, well, what did I eat while I was taking pictures of the food? There's a couple of things there that I very rarely eat anymore. Pineapple and red wine were kind of novel, and they just happened to have done that novel thing. So that gives me some ideas of things to look into, and I can look at those other times when things went awry and say, okay, do I see any pattern here? And being able to explore and have this sort of ability to generate new ideas and to test old ideas. So for instance, before this, I'd realized that travel was a problem, and sure enough, travel is involved in this one too. Score 1 for that hypothesis. And so in doing this, we realized that the tools are really, really important, and the missing tools, I think, is making things a lot harder than they should be. But by itself, it's not enough. And I think that the main insights that we gained in trying to do this with folks and realizing that you just throw the tools at them and nothing helpful really is likely to happen, is that there's really a lot of culture involved in this. There's a lot of culture in how you do it, what's how to approach things, how the tools work, that kind of stuff, and just getting the devices and the tools doesn't do that for you. And we know this in other aspects of our lives. If somebody wants to learn how to cook, no one expects that they can go out and buy pans and knives and read the user's manual and they know how to cook. But somehow we expect that of self-tracking. Also, the really important stuff that's going on here involves revising personal narratives and coming up with sort of candidate stories. Maybe I'm affected by this in this way. Well, let me go and look through that lens at my life and see what I see. And this is a very interpersonal process. It's very hard to do within your own head, but it's very easy to do talking to somebody else. And really realizing that this is not about the data, it's about the process. The data provides you kind of signposts in time and aspects of insight that are helpful, but that itself does not change things. What changes things is the process of capturing it and reflecting on it and changing things and seeing what that happens. So we want to be able to help people execute that process. So we added a role that we call Quant Coach. And so we started with a group of 10 people a year ago in preparation for Medicine 2.0. And I and Josh in New York have worked with about 20 people since. And involving a coach in the process, I think, can be really helpful. And you heard that in Katie's story. And what we found in sort of learning by doing this is that it's important to collaboratively decide on what to track and how to track it. And sort of loop back on that as well as the data itself. And that the terminology has to be very specific and personal. And it's very helpful in working with someone in order to be able to do that. It's also important to have somebody to work with you to help successfully use the tools, because there is a bar to being able to be able to use these things, and we can try to engineer it as low as we can. But ultimately, having somebody who knows what to expect and what it's supposed to do makes a huge difference. And also reflecting on the data, it's really important to use narratives from specific incidents, and that's, I think, where the explorability and the capture really helps. Is that instead of kind of just asking about kind of what in general is going on, you actually look at the specific, and it's looking at the specific that allows you to see things like, oh, this is what I ate that day. Maybe that gives me some new ideas. Whereas just sort of your general fuzzy memory of it usually wouldn't. And let me tell you a couple of examples here. Marcy was a participant in the first session that we did a year ago. And her main issue was that she had sleep disruption. So this is ZEO data. And if you look at the orange there, that is waking up at night. And she had a few months of data at this point, and they all looked like those top two lines where she was waking up several times a night. And in going into this, like Bo, her main idea was that her and her partner were waking each other up, and this was causing some relationship stress. But when we looked at it, when we looked at their data together, it just didn't hold up. And the other ideas that she had about carbs or caffeine or whatever also didn't hold up. But while we were working together, there was a serendipitous experience where she went to Burning Man and did this ritual at the Temple of Transition where you lay your burdens onto a pyre and you burn it. And then she had this perfect, beautiful, uninterrupted night of sleep. And she kept having perfect, beautiful, uninterrupted nights of sleep for between then and when we were talking. And she realized through this experience that something that was completely not on her radar is actually maybe very helpful to her, which is that maybe it has something to do with vigilance, and that somehow through this ritual she had accessed this sort of vigilance routine that she wasn't aware of. And that really helped her, sort of changing the narrative from this sort of contention to this sort of hopeful. Now she kind of has a handle on what to try. Another person that I worked with more recently is named Mike, and Mike suffers from sleep paralysis, and he has all his life. And it's sleep paralysis is basically where you become aware but your body won't move. It's very disturbing, but there's nothing that can be done about it. There's no drugs, there's no treatments. It's just, sucks to be you. And and so going into this, he didn't really have any ideas about what it might be. It was just sort of this thorn in his side. But in looking at but then he started capturing the data. And I get this email that I see the next morning from like 3 a.m. where he says, I got it. And it's the first time that I had a sleep paralysis, and the first time I was happy about it. And then he had another, just a few days later, and when we got together and looked at this, actually, he got an idea from this he hadn't had before, which is that these are the nights when he went to sleep the latest, and so he started thinking, well, maybe it has something to do with circadian rhythm disruption. Maybe if I have a more regular bedtime, this will happen less. And as we gained more data, it really seemed to support this hypothesis. And so now we're working on strategies for being able to get to bed, consistently at midnight. And so that's really helpful for him. And if you look at all of this, it's really a big part of the benefit is sort of having a story that you've figured out yourself and that works better for you than whatever default you had. And I really think that this sort of working together with somebody, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a professional, it just has to be somebody who's kind of gone through the process, knows what to expect, and can just sort of hold your hand on it. It's just like, most people don't learn fishing from a professional, they learn it from their buddies. I think that we can, starting from where we're at, we can basically, if we have it in the culture, to be able to help people together to bring them into this, that we can have this sort of coaching relationships, and maybe they get together at quantified self meetups, maybe online, maybe through word of mouth, and be able to spread it that way. And I think that will be really helpful. So, thank you.